advice. There's that question of like, how do we incorporate that into our everyday life? And that's really what I hope this workshop would be about, that it's for families, because I think when I consider mental health, I think that's something, my most powerful intervention as a psychiatrist is when I'm involved with the whole family. It's sort of weird because I guess in my field we think about, sort of certain boundaries, like, I'm your doctor, and then, your child sometimes, especially maybe everywhere, but in New York, there are a lot of different healthcare providers involved, and there's not a lot of, in some ways, integration. And so I think food is a way that we can really bring families together around mental health issues in a way that, kind of gets in the back door. So I wanted to talk about really some of the evidence. I wanted to talk about the foods, types of foods, at least in food categories that we're gonna think about, or we think about in nutritional psychiatry. Nutritional psychiatry is sort of a new field. It's just this idea, let's think about mental health, and as you'll hear, your brain is what consumes more of your food than anything else. So, what would your brain want to eat? And then how do we integrate that? It's easy to say lox and oysters and leafy greens, and then, I want to be practical. I'm a farm boy from Indiana. I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. I just like slide a dozen oysters for oyster night for dinner and be like, you guys want some Sauvignon Blanc with that and a little oyster bread? I just want to thank all the sponsors. This is just a really incredible event for me. And I'm from Southern Indiana. I now live on a small farm with my parents and my kids and my wife. You might think that actually I need a psychiatrist, since that I am a psychiatrist. But so I think a lot about families and how to feed families, and just in that simple transition of living in New York, cooking for the 4 of us a block from the Whole Foods, to moving to rural Indiana. We're in Crawford County. We hold some great titles. Like the one I'm pitching is that we're the greenest county in Indiana, because if you look at the Google map, we're down there at the bottom right in the middle of Hoosier National Forest, but actually we're the poorest county in Indiana. And so, and I would bet we have one of the highest per capita suicide rates. No one's really done that calculation, but our population has to change by about 9,000 people, and it's a bad mental health crisis. So how can we think about eating to beat depression? Now, at the outset, I find so often in this world, there's just this polarization, right? By talking about eating to beat depression, somehow that's a commentary on all the other treatments for depression. And I am like a card-carrying member of every little bit of my field. I prescribe meds, I do psychotherapy, I'll give you interpretations about your dreams and your unconscious, for sure. If anybody I had a great dream last night. Anybody else had a good dream last night? Right? It's like, I had one of those that I woke up and I was like, wow, I haven't had one like that in a while. Just quickly, because I'm a physician, disclosures, I don't take any money from really anyone except for patients and books. So mainly just patients, and if you have the book game. And I'm not going to talk about meds very much, other than just, again, what I said, that I use them, I like them, I'm interested in how we destigmatize them. And then stigma makes me irate. Now this is mean, like I'm not going to get angry at you. It's just like, I also think we have a lot of stigma and bias about mental illness. And I know I do, and I know I have, and I know it was maybe probably like a more effective doctor is just really, I started like trying to really take a step back from that. In my field, we call that your countertransference. Like when you have a strong feeling about anything, like wow, like that's not fact. That's something to really understand. Like I'm scared of this person. Like I don't feel like I trust this person. Or like, wow, this feels like really another one around hypomanic patients, and like they leave, and like it's so hard not to high five them. Because you begin to feel what they feel, and you get swept up in like the expansiveness of the universe. And it's like the best drug in the world. The human brain just like turned up a little bit. That is the best idea. It's true. Anybody who's had any experience with bipolar illness, it's like you get around it, and that's almost like how you know. I take a step back from that feeling, and I'm like, this is fun in here, but I wonder what this is like out there for the person, right? When they're running a little hot. This is my farm in Southern Indiana, in Crawford County. We've got about 127 acres. We're not good farmers, just so everyone knows. It's really bad soil. We may have done hay. We've planted a bunch of orchards, which rodents ate the first 2 versions. Now we've got like 6 pear trees. We just harvested. We make some pear butter for ourselves. Kind of manicured our forest over the years. So when people really push me, like, what kind of farmer are you? I was like, we got a big forest. And I've got good tractor skills, but compared to a lot of the farmers, we were out on Loma Farm on Thursday night. I mean, I'm so amazed by these smaller, few acre farms that are feeding hundreds and hundreds of people. They inspire me, and I hope hope someday to be that good. We've done some strange things, like we didn't really have any animals on the farm, so one summer I leased some goats that were lactating, and that's a strange thing to tell New Yorkers you're doing, but, and the reason, I guess this is maybe something to know about me, is that I get really curious on all the science data and the trends, right? Dairy is bad and inflammatory, and then I just like to go back to the source. And again, think about what's that feeling that I have. Like you spend time with a goat, you don't have a feeling that it's a toxic creature that's full of bad nutrients. You're like, this is like I don't know, it's somewhere between like a dog and a deer and a child with ADHD. Like goats, you like stick them in the pen, you're like, all right, good night. Like there's nothing that can harm you. And you come back and they're like, oh my God, I stuck my head in this little crack. But it's a real, if you haven't spent time around ruminants, it's a really, and it's sort of funny, I don't actually eat dairy right now, I've been having some gut issues, but besides the milk, it's just fascinating to spend time with ruminants. And again, think about this farm cycle. Like nothing else is gonna use, like this stuff, nothing else is gonna eat. And there's really nothing else that grows in that crappy clay soil of southern Indiana except that nice natural pasture and forest. So it's just a fascinating experience to get to sit with that feeling. I remember the first time we took them out in the pasture and like the sun was setting, my parents were there, and our kids were there, and the goats were there, and there's just this like sound. And they're just like, I don't know, they feel safe, you feel safe. So this has all led to me wanting to think about how do we combine, not the goats exactly, but my work has sort of led me to this question of like, it's interesting to sit with patients who come to you and they put their mental health in some ways in your hands. Right? And if you ask us and really push us, like, how do I pick Prozac versus Zoloft, or how do I actually know you have depression versus panic disorder? It's just sort of like diagnostic criteria in our field is subjective. And so I wanted to give my patients, and I think give myself, more tools as a physician. And it just seemed like food was a really obvious one. And so that's really been a focus of my work for about the past decade, is just trying to think, like, what should you eat? What should I tell my patients they should eat? What would the rules of that be for brain health? And so I was also with the warning, like I'm a diet book author, so it's my first 2 books were really fun. But I think leading up to this last book, I'm really trying to think very carefully, how do you make rules and how do you kind of expand the wellness argument or wellness discussion beyond just like happiness, right? Because it's always pitched as like, have more energy, have more focus, be happier. And I get that, but when I think about what's the important of food or what's the important of eating more kale, it's really around creating more resiliency in your brain. And that's really about trying to do your very best in your everyday life to position yourself to prevent any type of mental health symptoms. And then just quickly, since we're going to talk about depression, one of the reasons we're talking about depression is it's just one of the most common illnesses. Anxiety disorders hit about 40 million Americans. There's almost no data really about how anxiety relates to food, maybe like 4 or 5 studies. And most of the data is around depression. Depression is the most disabling illness in the world. 2020 will be the most disabling illness in America. And what that means is that depression sort of hits us at this core period of our life where we're most productive. I think disability is just such a more important measure for healthcare than mortality. Because that's going to happen. I spend a lot of time every week talking with people about dying and their fear of death, and it kind of leads you to this idea of like, really live life now, because that's happening. And so depression takes us out of enjoying that. And just, I wanted to put up the criteria. The DSM-5 is our diagnostic Bible in psychiatry, they call it. I like that. I kind of like to think we're a religion a little bit more than a little bit religion. But I like to put these up here just because depression is an illness that is more than mood. I meet a lot of people and their mood's like, nah, it's like okay. But what they're really struggling with is like horrible insomnia. They wake up every night at 2 a.m. and can't fall back asleep. And they've got this horrible carb craving. And then every now and then, independent of like being sad, they just feel really like lost in the world and a little suicidal. So they're not tearful and they're not irritable. It doesn't quite exactly fit. Depression has lots of symptoms related to our weight. Weight goes up and down. Our appetite can go up and down. Our sexual drive. So it's just more than just mood. And as I said last night, this is a statistic I just said I don't like. It's true, 20% of people in America suffer from a quote-unquote mental illness, but I really think it's time we flip this. That 5 in 5 of us have questions and challenges in our mental health. You might not meet diagnostic criteria, you might not need me, you might not need meds or therapy, but you definitely need to take care of your mental health. And we all, every week that goes by where you're not exercising, you're like, oh, I'm a bad person, this is another week I didn't exercise. But like, what would you do for your mental health? Like, what would you do like 3 times a week to like build mental health? Like, what does that even mean? I was on my bike ride today and I was like, how do you actually do that, build more mental health? Is it just sleep better, right? Is it just taking more deep breaths? Like, are there actual things that you can build like a muscle? And I think there are, and I think food is one of them. We know that we need to do more than just offer treatment. I mean, my field does not meet you until you're ill, and that's a big problem because most people don't get any treatment. Half of our kids don't ever seek any mental health treatment. And just quickly about that again, I think it's about stigma. I think it's so hard for families. I mean, so many families who have somebody with a depression who've lost someone to suicide. There's just like no conversation about it. I mean, you talk about stigmatizing. I've had a few parents who've lost kids to suicide. And in New York, it's like literally like you have the plague. Nobody wants to talk to you or be around you because you must have done something real wrong, right? And then everybody says the same thing to you. Like, oh, that's the worst. Yeah, parents never get over that. And like, that's the milieu you walk into. There's no conversation. And boy, there's a lot of conversation that needs to be had, not just about those severe circumstances, but what happens when there's depression in a household. I just got a text this morning from a gentleman. It says, the dog ate our house again. I want to take it away, but I'm scared that she might do something dangerous, meaning his daughter. Right? His daughter doesn't even have a mental health diagnosis. She's just anxious and a little depressed and 10. And so there's a way that increasing the conversation about mental health really starts with you all. I increasingly recommend to everybody every audience I get to speak with, just remember that you all are the front lines of the mental health system. And so it might be a little thing like helping people eat better. That's one little piece of the puzzle, but the biggest piece of the puzzle missing, I think, is you. You just really opening up your heart and your mind and your kindness to talking about mental health. There's a lot of hope besides all the heavy talk. There's a lot of hope. People are really looking for, I think, new breakthroughs in brain science. And I'm very excited about like this molecule. This molecule is new. We didn't know about this when I finished medical school, class of 2000 at IU. But brain derived neurotrophic factor really shows us the brain continues to grow in adult life. And that's just exciting because it then leads to the question like, okay, I'd like more of that, more brain as I get older. Like I'm 45, I can feel it's going, or like somebody says like, yeah, that was great last Thursday what you said in session. I'm like, yeah. Good to see you again. Just a few days ago. It doesn't happen much with the name thing, right? Anybody my age, you're like, I know it. I'm going to go through the alphabet because it's coming to me because it's F. It's F something. It's not Frank though. It's like not Frank or Fred. And you go and you go and go, and then eventually, like where you used to find it, you don't anymore. And so I want a lot of this in my brain because you can feel sort of between 45 and 60 is the most rapid period of brain shrinkage for everybody. And if you look at like, okay, it gets like sort of heavy once you start forgetting words and stuff, like what can you do to get more of this? Right? Not that this is a perfect biomarker, but like, I don't know, with the science we have, let's do something. And so it's very exciting when you see, well, antidepressants, most of them trigger some of this. When you see, exercise, we all agree exercise is good for our mental health, right? Do we need science for that? I don't need science for that. Do you need science for that? It's like you finish the run and you're like, so BDNF gets triggered by exercise, meditation, right? And it turns out 5 or 6 nutrients affect BDNF, and so does your dietary pattern. So how can we eat? Sort of thinking, not just about our waistline, but really thinking about our brain. We've done a lot to change food. I went over this last night, but I just wanted to make everybody kind of thought about it, because this is, again, the context by which I think we pivot. Instead of like looking towards the future for that silver bullet in our mental health, we understand we have a lot of effective treatments and we're living a lifestyle that doesn't really do the best that we can to support brain health. Now, I think it's something like 80% of calories in America are some sort of processed food, either pre-prepared or packaged foods. Maybe that statistic isn't quite right, but it's way up there. We've just started eating sugar and refined carbohydrates in all kinds of wild ways that have been marketed to us. These low-fat, low-cholesterol foods that are great for your heart health. Like, have you looked at a box of Cocoa Puffs or any of those sugary cereals and seen that American Heart Association seal of approval on them? You should. Because that's in some ways, no offense to the cardiologist, but that's in some ways how we've been directing all of our dietary advice, right? And no offense, like, it's cool, I'm glad I've got mine, I'm glad you've got yours. But it's pump, right? And think about, if we're gonna really orient our food, should we orient it towards like the coolest thing in the universe, the human brain? like trillions and trillions of connection, human consciousness, dreams, like that great dream I had last night. Where the hell did that come from, right? Wow. So that's how we should orient our food. And so in getting off of sort of fat, cholesterol, and going through that movement of this last 50 years, we've just swapped over and started eating refined carbohydrates and sugars. We stopped eating animal fats. Not that I'm suggesting you go eat lard, but what did we replace animal fats with? We replaced them with vegetable fats, right? Corn oil, soybean oil. These fats that are great for our heart health, apparently. And in doing that, there are these very long-chain fats. You guys are like, okay, this is for families. How am I going to be taking these long-chain fats to my children? We'll talk about that in one second. But they're important to understand because they're the longest fats in your body, and in some ways there's these really nuanced, they're functional fats. Right? You got to stop thinking about fat as like that stuff you want to get rid of, and start thinking about fat like, I think about the longest chain omega-3 fat kind of like James Bond. It's like 007. It like goes in your brain, occupies, in every cell there's a little bit of DHA, about 8% of every brain cell, the weight of it is DHA, this long chain omega-3 fat. And it fights inflammation, it makes your brain cells just kind of work better in a variety of ways of looking at the evidence. And so we want more of that in our diet, and we really switched. And then we've added all this new stuff to food that, like, I don't know, like again, like I don't know how much science I need that like red dye number 5 is bad for my child's brain. And it's just like, it's something that they've never eaten. It's something that clearly like affects mental health and EEGs in some way. And again, like the main reason I don't like this stuff, like dyes, preservatives, is that it skews how our brain interprets and thinks about food. Right? Like I've never counted a calorie, ever. Never tried to diet. I weigh the basically same as I did throughout college and medical school. I weighed a little bit more maybe a month ago, and I realized I was too much to talk. So somehow without counting calories, I went back to my regular weight. You don't really need to count calories if you're just really honest with your brain about what you're eating and you're feeding it stuff that it recognizes. When you begin to feed the brain strange colors, strange sugars, right? Like some of the sugars that we eat and we've produced are like 200 times sweeter than any natural sugar. That's great if you're a food processor. I don't know what that means if you're a brain. That's like super confusing, right? Your brain, anytime you eat something sweet, it's like, yes, sweet, get some fresh fruit. Maybe, he found some honey. Oh, that was good. That's it. That's all that was sweet. That and like caramelized vegetables. Anyway, so this has all led to us not getting enough of these nutrients. And this is old data. This data has basically gotten worse. And what's very interesting is to think about, like some of these molecules just directly relate to your brain health. Like vitamin E, very strong correlation. People with low vitamin E have a much increased risk of depression. BDNF, that super cool molecule, says it gets stimulated by 6 nutrients. Zinc's one of those. About half of people don't get enough zinc every single day. So there's a way that, in some ways, I guess I show you those beginning pictures to just say, I'm kind of a simple farm boy when I think about this. There's lots of cool data, I'll show you some of it, but it also just seems sort of clear that we switched over and we're just not getting enough of the nutrients for our brain. And that, I think, affects its function. This band, quickly, I just like to remind people where pizza came from, and it tells us a story of history here. This is Christopher Columbus, the father of pizza, and Christopher came back from the New World with tomatoes, and it makes you wonder what was Italian food before there was tomatoes. I really have. Does anybody know that actually? Because we're here. No. Yeah, so was there Italian food before tomatoes? So he came back with corn. Corn was super cool because it's easy to grow. It's a grass. Kind of crazy. I think they didn't have corn in the old world. And it goes around and it gets turned into all kinds of forages, like polentas, and it spreads throughout Hungary and Transylvania. People just eating corn. And the problem is Christopher Columbus forgets that everybody who eats corn soaks it in lime. And when you do that, you release vitamin B3. What happened is there began to be these rumors of people coming out at the night, scratching their skin, because sunlight would burn them, and they sucked blood, and they were agitated if you ran into them on the road. Imagine this, right? It's like, what was it, 1492 he came over, so this is like 1550. You're out on the dark road in Hungary or Transylvania, and you hear some like, blah, 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 and you look, and there's a man itching his skin, and he's got blood running down his mouth, and he's demented, so he's like, ah. You'd think he was a vampire, right? Look at this guy. You'd be like, vampires. But there's just no vitamin B3 in this man's diet because it wasn't being released from the corn because he didn't soak it with lime. And it's just a story not to suggest that all of our mental illness is caused by nutritional deficiencies, but just to suggest if we've changed our diet this much, and in some ways just think about, like, I've never owned a Ferrari, but I bet if you stop putting the jet race fuel stuff in the Ferrari and just put like the E85 with 15% ethanol, I bet it doesn't run as well. And I kind of think that's what we've done to our brains. What happens, by the way, when you get niacin is you get diarrhea. So that's one of the reasons they're agitated. You get dermatitis, this bad skin. Pellagra means thick skin in Italian. You get this like thick, horrible rash. And then you get demented, and then you die. And if you think about, like, that makes sense. And that's actually where the legend of the vampires come. Remember the next place the vampires show up? Show up down in New Orleans, another place where non-nixtamalized corn became a staple of the diet. Not to ruin any of those Vampire Diary books for you guys. So there have been some trials now looking at food, and I just want to, again, start talking to you about your food and getting you to think about your food, right? One of the ways that we work with patients in nutritional psychiatry that's nice is we have more time, so we can kind of do the slow jam version. Like, tell me about your diet. I don't need you to fill out a bunch of forms. I just want to hear, like, walk me through your life. What do you usually eat for breakfast? What do you usually eat for lunch? Or what are your favorite snacks? Right? Just tell me about the last 3 or 4 days, what you ate. And as you just sort of think through that, first of all, we're very biased in our recall. It's where when you do exercises like this, where you're just thinking about your food or thinking about your changing your food, it's really important to write things down. And so the SMILES trial came about because there have been a lot of correlational studies. And I don't think I have any of them here. The correlational studies, I'm trying to cut the research out of this one, basically look at populations and follow them over time with no intervention, trying to find correlations. And a correlation doesn't equal causation. You'll always hear that in science and medicine, but it's how we kind of begin our hypothesis. And so one of my favorites follows 10,000 university students. Again, this is important, especially with mental health, because that's when mental health conditions hit. And so for 10,000 students, they followed them for 4.5 years, and they ranked their diet on the Mediterranean dietary pattern scale. And they found that those individuals who were kind of eating in the top half of meaning like pretty good in terms of Mediterranean diet, but like all of us in this room, not perfect, they reduced their risk of depression over those 4.5 years by about 40 to 50%. And they ran the numbers a bunch of different ways, and all the ways that you'd hope as a physician that they do, and they looked at all the various confounders, and the correlation stuck. And so that allows us then to say, well, this is a pretty interesting hypothesis. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you eat more of those nutrients that are good for your brain, aren't you going to have better mental health? And then we've done, not we, but the sort of nutritional psychiatry field has now completed 4 randomized trials, which is really the gold standard in medicine where we test something. So this is the classic, this is actually the first ever randomized clinical trial in the history of medicine looking at the Mediterranean diet to treat depression. And they took a small trial, about 60 individuals, split them in half, said half of you are gonna get nutritional counseling, 7 sessions, the other half of you are you're gonna get a social group, hang out, talk. And what they found is that individuals were able to rapidly change their diet, kind of Mediterranean diet, Mediterraneanize it. Not drastically, people eating a couple more servings of beans and legumes a week, people were eating more leafy greens, people were drinking less beer and eating less fried food. What they found is that there were about 1/3 of them went into full remission from getting the dietary intervention. Now, that's like a really powerful number. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're dealing with resistant depression, if I have an intervention that has no side effects, that tastes delicious, and it saved individuals $140 a month, that's pretty good, at least good for me, and good for the field. We then got into a question, this is a research paper that my colleague Laura LaChance and I published, saying, what are the most nutrient-dense foods for depression? Because you can tell people to eat the Mediterranean diet, and it kind of can sound like, Italian food and Greek food and pizza and pasta. And if it's not where you come from, it's hard to suddenly imagine if I say, what really matters, guys, is the Japanese diet. So tonight, I need you to go home and make sushi for your children. That's really the way to beat depression. Right? You'd be like, okay. And then you leave here and, that's not your dietary pattern. That's not how you kind of think about food. That's not what's available to you in the grocery store. And so it's one of these things we have to do a better job of in medicine is translating these nutrients into foods and then try to translate them into foods that are here in Traverse City or here in your home grocery store. Because otherwise it's just, bailing against the tide. And so I wanted to answer at least with some sense, because as you recommend food to people, I found I was saying blueberries, wild salmon, for sure. And then, but what else, right? What else is really a nutrient-dense food to recommend? And some of the foods you're recommending, like eggs or nuts, are those the right things to recommend? How could I kind of prove that to my colleagues? And so This is a nutrient profiling system we created where we just looked in all of the literature. So we did a big literature search of all of the nutrients, all the vitamins and minerals that are essential to human life, and depression. And looked at this big data set and said, all right, which of these studies are actually really good, high quality studies? We looked at those, we ranked them, we found that there were 12 nutrients that met evidence criteria to include. And then we just said, what of these, what foods have the most of these nutrients per calorie? It's called nutrient density, and it's just a really important concept for you to take from here. Nutrient density is the only reason you should consider calories. I guess I'm saying one of the reasons I think my weight has been normal is not anything to do with my genetics, it's just that I've eaten nutrient-dense foods. And those are just foods that have the most nutrients per calorie, which means you're never gonna end up needing more food for more nutrients. So this is what we found, and what's important about this is to look at the food categories. Nutrient profiling systems, people will look at this and be like, oh my gosh, like there's no emu in my diet. That's definitely why I'm depressed. Definitely. There's, right. So like whelks, like I've never eaten a whelk, just so you know. But the idea is to look at the food categories, right? What are those top plant food? Watercress. What's watercress a member of? It's green, it's a leafy green. And if you think about, well, all leafy greens, kale, watercress, arugula, are they like iceberg lettuce? You're gonna see what's happened to the American diet. Iceberg lettuce is like, it's water, and it's good to eat water. I mean, it's like a plant, it's good to eat plants, but there's really not any nutrients in iceberg lettuce. Actually, if you just switch your iceberg lettuce for romaine, you've suddenly bumped up the nutrient density of that salad. Or if you take your iceberg lettuce and you chop up some cabbage or some kale or some watercress and just mix it in there because you like that fresh taste of watercress. You like the wedge salad. Who doesn't like a wedge salad sometimes, right? Such a cute little plant, the iceberg. So, leafy greens. What else do you see up there? You see like colors, right? Red peppers. And so eating the rainbow is one of those kind of popularized nutritional advice notions that is just spot on. When you look at your plate and you see natural colors, you're getting a variety of phytonutrients. We'll talk about that more in a second. And then what's on the animal foods? You're mainly getting seafood, organ meats, and the bivalves, the top 5. This is probably one of the, at least for me, it was one of the nice findings here. Because when I began to look at seafood and talk to people about seafood, everybody's talking about wild salmon, which is a great one. But when you think about sort of cost and also what's available to people, you run into the bivalves, mussels, clams, and oysters. And they're just not only packed with omega-3 fats, at least mussels and oysters are, but also they just have so much of these nutrients that we found were most highly correlated with depression. Things like vitamin B12, zinc, selenium. So anyway, the data really lines up around the Mediterranean diet, and as I said, if we were gonna translate that into our households, what would we actually do? It's not like farm boy in me. It's like, okay, like the evidence, I don't know, it looks pretty good, and probably America's diet sucks, so like, hey, what should you do tomorrow? Like, what are you gonna do tomorrow? It's like, that whole idea about mental health awareness. Like, I don't know, I'm getting a little impatient with that. It's like 2019, aren't you aware, right? Like 70,000 overdoses, 45,000 suicides per year. Like, don't we have awareness? So isn't it time for us to just not really be thinking so much about awareness, but think about action? So like, what about this is gonna cause you to take action in your diet? It's kind of what I think. Like the only fat I think these days in my house, for the most part, besides a little coconut oil, is olive oil. There's some way that I'm thinking about as I go through those jugs of olive oil. Right? I don't know, 1992 when I was a low-fat vegetarian, I'd be like, ooh, olive oil. Now that's the one way that I know I'm doing a good job. So I'm churning through that stuff. I was pretty liberal in it. Why? No carbohydrates, no sugars, great amount of antioxidants, great fat for making my vegetables taste delicious, increase the solubility of all those fat-soluble nutrients in my vegetables. Right? Just like, and everybody agrees olive oil is good for you, except for the super low-fat advocates. And I also look for foods like that because we all get neurotic. Even I get neurotic, right? I started eating meat again years ago, and I was like, uh-oh, what's gonna happen? So olive oil is great. Fresh fruits and vegetables. I suspect most people in this room do a great job of that. But I always think we have a plant challenge because we live in a land ubiquitous with easy carbohydrates. Right? It's hard to get vegetables. And so I encourage people in all kinds of ways to think of how do you expand that, and then also how do you expand the diversity. Like, somebody was talking about parsnips. I had parsnips for the first time in a while. That's great. I don't ever buy a parsnip. Like, I don't think I've ever bought a parsnip, right? And that's just a way that I can kind of, what I usually go into the potatoes, and I get some colorful potatoes these days. But where are my parsnips, right? Well, I don't have a recipe for a parsnip. It's not part of like my food culture. And so you can see that it's easy to say eat more plants and eat more rainbows, but again, that kind of where the rubber hits the road of how do you actually incorporate it into your diet? How do you change and get more diversity of plants? The Mediterranean diet has lots of whole grains. Grains gets really controversial because there's this notion that like all mental health problems are caused by gluten, which is actually not the case. Gluten sensitivity does happen to a small percentage of people in America, for sure, and it's definitely one of the biggest home runs you'll ever hit as a doctor, because you meet somebody and it's like you take a history and they eat breads or carbs, they've never heard of gluten sensitivity or celiac disease, you tell them stop eating all carbohydrate, all breads and gluten. They do, and they're just, all of their health turns around. No more bloating, no more diarrhea, no more brain fog, no more mental health problems. It's a miracle. And that happens to like, I don't know, there's about 1 million people, 3 million people, 1 to 3 million people with celiac disease in America, and most of them are undiagnosed. So part of the reason we think so positively about that idea, I guess so negatively about gluten, is that when that happens, it's a healthcare miracle. And everybody wants to, sort of apply it then en masse to the population. But the fact is, most people do okay with gluten, and the fact is that most whole grains and ancient grains, gluten, think about what happens to gluten when you make sourdough bread. You drop it by about half. What happens if you double ferment a bread? It becomes so low in gluten that you could actually sell it as a gluten-free product. So think about that. That's usually how bread was made, some sort of fermentation process back in the day. So let's just sort of take this to your house, because again, the intention here is to think about what is brain food, right? As opposed to think about like the macronutrients. Is this a good food for protein, or is this a low-fat food? Like, what does your brain want? I guess what I'm suggesting is your brain, I think, wants some nutrients, very specific nutrients, like the B vitamins, some of the minerals, and mainly what your brain's interested in is nutrient-dense foods. Because when you have nutrient-dense foods, you're not pulling in excess calories and excess sugars. When you're not doing that, you're not laying down visceral fat. And visceral fat's really annoying to your brain, because visceral fat, it's not just storage of calories, it's metabolically active tissue that's quite pro-inflammatory. Your brain is busy making consciousness. It doesn't have time for chronic inflammation. It's like busy with hopes and dreams. And so it's where nutrient density really applies both when people are thinking about weight loss, but also when you're thinking about brain health and just food selection. What are the most nutrient-dense foods that you can eat, and especially that you like? Focus on dietary pattern. Again, it's that way when families plan out their meal. A lot of times we plan around proteins, right? What are we having tonight? Steak or chicken or fish or veggie night? And as opposed to some other ways of thinking about it, like who's going to cook, or is it going to be a cultural theme, or are we going to have soup? Sure, on Christmas Eve, I don't know why I had this tradition, we just have a kale salad and soup. First of all, it's like a lot easier hosting. People are a little disappointed at first, but like then they get into it, like, oh no, it's cool, like gratitude. Yeah, no, I get it. But are there ways to kind of think about your dietary pattern and also set small goals? I find so often with people clinically, it's this huge like swings of goals, usually around weight, usually around fasting, and I'm really, again, a simple person. I really like consistent, like how can we make things exciting, not so consistent as boring, but how can we be something that you maintain and sustain because you love it? I guess that's the piece of advice I forgot in the beginning of just, the most important thing, more important than nutrient density and dietary pattern neuroplasticity, is that you just have a feeling of joyfulness, that you and your family have a feeling of joyfulness around food. And I find that's like the tricky one, right? As a dad and a husband and a parent and an eater, right? Of how do you get to that, I call it like when our kids were young, people would like start getting, I don't know, agitated or whatever. I'd be like, shh, they're in the pocket. Meaning like everyone's quiet and the kid's eating something it likes. And I was like, don't disturb this. This is precious time. And I think about what it is precious time, right? When was the last time you sat with your family or people you liked and just had one of those quiet meals where the phones were down, where someone had cooked it, where you have that mindful eating experience where you actually sit with your food as opposed to those who's had, I told you my brain was going, that's probably not good for pitching brain health, but who's had one of those moments where you're just not mindful, you look down, you're like, who took my last bite? Where did that go? Because you were just eating, you weren't with your food, you were with the people who were with your food. So, sorry, back to the science stuff, just want to throw some joyfulness in there. Neuroplasticity, again, this idea that your brain grows, right? Like, shouldn't that drive all of your healthcare choices? I mean, I'm biased, I'm a brain guy, but I mean, like, honestly, what other organ are you thinking about? You're really, like, focusing your health based on, how we're gonna look in our swimsuits, or, no, we should focus it on your brain. That's the best part of you. By far, that is the best part of you, trust me. And then what do we target? In the clinic, whenever I hear these complaints, people come see me for all kinds of different things. And when I hear anything about mood or anxiety, it's not that the only thing I'm gonna do is food, but I'm wondering, like, how does that relate? Like, you hear somebody has panic attacks every day at 1 p.m. Then you hear they never eat breakfast. I don't think you have to go to medical school to just think about, like, a little crazy experiment to try. Why don't you try eating a little protein for breakfast? Have an egg. See how you feel at lunch. It sounds to me like you're getting kind of dizzy. People with panic disorder tend to be really sensitive and not sensitive in like that kind of stigmatizing way, but their nervous systems actually picks up on stuff and gets worried. I get a little heart flutter and I'm like, yeah, I probably know what it is. People with panic disorder get a heart flutter and it really consumes them. They get pulled in and all they can think about are these body sensations. So that's a person who, like, low blood sugar, that's just something you want to try and prevent. Just again, before you try other interventions, is a basic idea. We had a patient with really severe panic disorder who was a district attorney. And it was like, she's tough. It was like one of those women you meet and then you're like, dang, you're so much badass tougher than I am. Like, you take down criminals. Like, I just sit here in this office and, like, talk about your feelings. But she's had horrible panic attacks. And we just had her stock our office with snacks that worked for her. And I'd say it dropped them by about 80%. Right? Just like really easy intervention. Again, your brain is hungry. It's consuming 420 calories a day. So for most people, that's about 20% of what you eat. Although I'd say 2,000 calorie diet is it's a strange way we think about food, right? That focusing on calories as opposed to nutrient density. Most of the sugars are 60% of what you eat. And then your brain's mainly fat. I just think that's, again, an important concept for shifting how you think about fat, moving from this idea of low-fat diets to really nutrient-dense diets. As I was saying, it's not a complicated assessment I do in clinical practice. I just decided that everybody I met as a doctor, I just wanted to have some idea of a few things. What did they eat? And how did they think about nutrition and self-nourishment? And then it just led into all these interesting conversations. You'd think we'd ask in psychiatry, like, what was it like around the dinner table for you when you were a kid? Because, that just takes us right into the good stuff, right? That's all about how you got nourished, you got seen, you got heard of, and you could learn fascinating stuff. And I was like, why wasn't this part of my eval forever? But besides going into the Wayback Machine, just in terms of staying present with people in terms of what they eat, what their favorite foods are, and these questions are trying to really get into your motivation. Like, I might think your problem food is your big gulp Slurpee, but that might be your treat on Fridays. I don't know. And so understanding for you what your motivations are is something that so often gets missed. Try to own that medicine. Like, I want you to have my goals, right? Don't eat sugar, don't eat fat, don't eat salt. And like, this really doesn't work. Like, what we should do in medicine is foster your goals. Like, what are your goals for your food? What are bits you should eat for your brain health? Like, what do you think your problem foods are? What's your family's problem foods? As I call them, your challenge foods. Because, like, those problem foods, they're foods too, right? And then I looked at these high yield foods of just where over the years it seemed to be struggling. People struggle with seafood. Just one of those categories that Americans don't eat 14 pounds per person per year. And most recommendations in most cultures that are healthy are eating seafood 2 to 4 times a week. Right? And just think about, like, again, operationalizing that in your own diet. What's that mean? To me, that means shrimp tacos and wild salmon and mussels and pasta vongole, because I like pasta and clams are amazing. Right? But what's it mean for you? I like to focus on meat with people just because meat is where a lot of folks just are making bad choices all the time, and also in some ways supporting a food system that I don't really think is going to get us there. And so I really think you should be very selective in how you eat meat and what meats you eat, but I'm definitely in the camp that you should eat it. I'm not in the camp that you should only eat meat, although I find that really fascinating, and just that people are now carnivores. And I find it fascinating because I love hearing the exact same story from the vegans and the carnivores, right? Like, I did this thing, right? One of these things, and like, and I was sick like this, and now I'm super healthy. I'm the healthiest person ever. And you hear like, wow, you guys are the opposite thing, and you guys are the same place. Like, how does that work? Probably works that we're all a little bit different, right? And that's where, again, it's for you to find your path, not for me to tell you. So again, this motivation to change your diet. And then again, what do you think about? What do you guys usually eat for breakfast? This is a family workshop, so tell me some breakfasts.
Cereal.
Cereal, okay. Eggs.
Yogurt.
Avocado toast, that's such a good one. Oatmeal, right? What do you guys think you should eat for breakfast?
Oysters.
Somebody tell me a brain healthy breakfast that you're like thinking of based on some of what we talked about. Like, let's think about this avocado toast. Tell me a brain healthy version of that versus a not so healthy version of that.
Brown bread.
Brown bread, put it on a sweet potato. That's some creative toast right there. I'd bust you on that. I'd be like, I want my toast. This purple yam that you smeared some guac on, like I'm all for the avocado toast movement. So I said some brown bread, right? So sometimes brown bread just is because they put molasses in there. And sometimes brown bread is because one of these artisanal bakers has made this like incredible hearty bread. What are some other ways we might increase the nutrient density of a bread? What else can we put in there? Put an egg in there. Put some nuts and some seeds, right? Pumpkin seeds, amazing ads. So you can see that toast, it could be just a white carb, or it could be something with a lot of nutrients. The avocado, how can you bump up the nutrient density of that? Pour some olive oil on it, chop up a little red pepper, put some lemon juice. Right? So all kinds of easy ways, and if you really want to go crazy, I put a little piece of lox on there. Right? Yeah, exactly, right? It's like, because I'm just like, I'm always seafood counting. I do a little dance. I was like, because the seafood gods are watching. Because again, easy way, especially with kids. This is for kids. Right? Sometimes my kids just like to roll cream cheese in lox and eat it, and then they like to put fish oil pills in their mouth and pop them. Yeah, exactly. Like, great, whatever. But it's one of those meals that, you see kids eating omega-3s. How about some lunches? Who's got a lunch challenge for us to fix? Have we got a lunch challenge? On the go, on the run, at work? It's okay, Taco Bell, it's okay. I saw there's a Taco Bell right there. Sometimes you're on the road. Lunch challenges? What do you guys do? You guys don't eat lunch? You guys don't eat lunch? You're fasters? Intermittent fasters?
Protein bar.
Salad, protein bar, okay. Other ones? Yes.
Well, I like to eat my biggest meal around 1 or 2.
Okay.
So I might have a bigger.
You can tell us your big lunch. I'm a fan. I'm not a judger. I said stigma makes me irate, but big lunches don't make me irate. So you have a big lunch.
Well, like even tuna fish, or I like sardines that I mush up. I put a little bit of just a little mayonnaise, and then lemon, and then I put it under the broiler with a little Parmesan cheese.
Oh, that sounds good. And then you put that like on some greens, or you just like.
I put it on toast. I put it on.
I love how people say like toast. Like I like toast, okay? Like I don't think toast is evil. Like toast. One of the reasons I like toast is because of this, right? Think about how delicious that toast is with that sardines and a little bit of cheese on there. It's like so yummy. And then she's eating one of the healthiest things you can eat. One of the reasons is sardines. You eat those little bones, so they're actually one of the top sources of calcium. And all women need calcium. So you get lots of omega-3s because you're eating a seafood, and you get a real easy, fun way. And also she said she makes it at home. So that sounds great to me. Anybody have a normal lunch they want to share? Leftovers from the night before. Again, an easy way when you're thinking about a family, right? One of the things that when you're a family, you realize is there's not lots of time. That pocket, get into that little golden period where you and whoever's in your family are sitting around the table, like relaxed, right? Having that little moment of silence wherever you start the meal, just to like settle in for a second. To get there means being efficient. One of the great ways is then batch cooking. So on a Sunday, one of the things we'll definitely work with folks is like, hey, if you love chicken, how about do a couple of chickens instead of just one? And that week you've got some nice, free range oven roasted chicken to add into salads, to add into soups, to drop in to your kid's lunchbox. Right? So spending some time being really efficient is a great way to prep for lunch. Samantha, who works with me as a social worker and a chef, and she always brings her lunch. Always. We have a little fridge, and she always has a little thing of greens in there, some roasted vegetables from the night before, usually a couple of hard-boiled eggs. So not hard to do. But again, one of those things also that I think people struggle with, because the bigger you eat your lunch and the earlier, usually the sleepier you get at 3. So it's where we kind of focus on sort of easy proteins and greens and whole grains. Snacks, what do you guys like to snack on? Popcorn? Okay, how do you make, what's that most unhealthy version of that snack? Microwave popcorn. You can get some popcorn lung if you want, and some propylene glycol, which sometimes make me feel kind of good. And what's the healthiest popcorn you can make? Air pop popcorn, right? But if you want to make it a little, just let's be creative, a little healthier, could you make a rainbow out of popcorn? You could, like I've seen some black popcorn, and then what can you sprinkle on there? Drop some nutritional yeast in there, especially for anybody who's vegan or plant or sort of super plant forward or not getting a lot of B12 in your diet. Drop some nutritional yeast on there, right? Drop some herbs and spices on there. Why? Those are super nutrient dense. Lots and lots of phytonutrients, lots of minerals. And then dinner, what kind of dinner do you guys like? You guys just don't eat very much. Everyone's scared. Right? This will be a workshop.
Breakfast for dinner.
Breakfast for dinner. I like meaning like a couple eggs, some veggies. That's a great move. People don't do this enough for a lot of reasons. One is, again, nutrient density. Eggs are 70 calories an egg. I just don't think you can really go wrong with 140 calories or again, lots of protein, lots of B vitamins and choline. And then, like toast, eggs are a great brain food delivery vehicle. Not only are they brain food themselves if you do it right, but you drop in some veggies. I like to do the farmer skillet. I'll go get some kale, chop it up fine, get it a little soft in the pan, throw in whatever else is in my garden, a couple tomatoes, drop in my eggs. Right? Real easy. I won't even do a dish just to save, water. Other dinners people like?
Pizza.
Thank you. Pizza. So how do you make pizza a little healthier?
More vegetables.
Yeah, add some veggies, add some sardines. I'll show you, there's one I do with clams. Not that it's horrible to eat pizza every now and then, but we all get in that rotation, right? That's your order. Big cheese pie. Like, fine, every now and then get a big cheese pie. There's a lot of cheese pie every now and then. Like, how can you kind of increase the nutrient density of that pizza and use it as a brain food delivery device? Anytime you see that white carb on the bottom, if it's toast, if it's pizza, if it's pasta, my question for you is, how do you bump up the nutrient density of that carb, right, to make it a slower carb? And then how do you put stuff on top of it that makes it worth it? And that's just a way, again, to sort of think about increasing the nutrient density of your diet. Snacks? What do you guys like to snack on? Nuts and berries. That's good. I like the front row here. They're very good. We got nuts, berries, and sardines. We don't want to it was supposed to be a workshop. We got a challenge with this. We got some pork rinds that you're eating or something. Like, it's okay. We're among friends here. It's like anything. Cheez-Its. There we go. Thank you. So I live in Indiana, and I fly. I'm ashamed to say this is for filming, but I go back and forth to New York every week. And on my flight, they have the snacks they come by with, and they have the Cheez-Its. And I just want you to know that I eat Cheez-Its too. I have about a bag a week. It's part of my dietary pattern. Sometimes if I'm feeling, a little off, I'll have 2 bags. So, again, but how do I upgrade that? I also make sure I grab the almonds in there. I also make sure I get some water. I make sure that after that second Cheez-It, I don't have a third, or I don't try and go for a beer because I've had so much salt and I have a big water, right? So you sort of try and contain it. I heard nuts. Nuts are a great snack I recommend to you guys because they're easy to store. You can always have them with you, and the more you get your palate adjusted, I'm sure those of you who are kind of off sugar and processed foods, which I feel is like everybody in this audience, that way that like you get this return of your palate. So like when I eat cashews taste a little sweet to me. Right? They taste very different than an almond. They taste very different than a walnut. And it's one of those things that maybe it's also just being a little bit more mindful and having those with me as a regular snack. I like nuts because I'm on the move all the time and I just have them in my bag. And if I get a little funky, I throw down a little handful of nuts. It's a great mix of slow carbs, protein, and monounsaturated fats. Other snacks, somebody said dark chocolate covered almonds, great snack. Great snack, right? Think about it. I talked to a reporter once who was eating she said, help me with this one, I'm eating white chocolate covered pretzels. Well, think about it. What's in a white chocolate covered pretzel? Sugar. Yeah, and what's white chocolate? How much chocolate's in white chocolate? No, isn't that crazy? When I learned that, I was like, well, why do you call it chocolate? Why don't you just call it like white sugar? It's like, that's what it is. So white, and so nothing in there but carbs, right? You can understand why that's not a great snack. Think about it, you swap that out. I said, what did you like? Oh, I like the sweet, I like the crunch, and I like that, you know, it's a little guilty snack. It's like, hey, you want to have the guilt, that's between you and your shrink, but how about a dark chocolate covered almond? Same thing, sweet treat, crunch. Well, dark chocolate's full of magnesium and fiber, right? It's got all these interesting polyphenols and flavonols, these phytonutrients in it. Not vitamin E is in an almond, fiber in an almond, monounsaturated. So think about the nutrient density of that chocolate covered almond versus the white chocolate covered pretzel. So maybe that's obvious. But I started keeping track of patients and what they ate, and this is the kind of thing that I was seeing. This is one of my patients. And again, what do you see up here? What's the major kind of molecule? Carbohydrates, specifically glucose, right? You think about that what you're seeing up there, pasta is basically just glucose. The pizza crust, glucose. The gummy bears. Right? I say to my patients, like, eat the rainbow, and this guy was like, eat the rainbow, Doc! Gummy bear rainbow! And the astronaut ice cream. He's like, but it's astronaut ice cream. I mean, they wouldn't serve astronauts anything bad for them in space, would they? It's like, and I agreed. I was like, probably that's the healthiest ice cream you could get, freeze-dried astronaut ice cream. But as you look at there, you don't really see rainbows, right? You don't really see, I mean, think about green vegetables. You've got, like, maybe there's a green vegetable, the roasted pork with some, I mean, is there even a green vegetable in there? Like, barely. There's blueberry toast with avocado. I mean, like, I feel like that wasn't the best move, but also it sounds disgusting to me. But you know, they're trying to increase the nutrient density of your bread there. But again, I met this individual, he's living with his parents, he had finished college, he was depressed, he was upset. Is this the diet that's gonna get him out of the basement and into his life? Like, I didn't think so, and he didn't think so. And so again, it becomes an intervention that I think helps. So translating these nutrients that we talked a little bit about into food, I think is really one of your big jobs as an eater. We stop saying, you should get more fiber. It's like, what does that mean to you? Right? Is that gonna come from beans? Is it gonna come from collards? Where's it gonna come from? It's gonna come from nuts. Like, you need more vitamin B12 in your diet. Like, that's something that you should all test. Vitamin B12 is something every primary care doctor is hopefully gonna look at, because it's the biggest B vitamin that you have, and it's actually critical to your brain health. Actually, even if it's normal, so my B12 is kind of in the mid-range, and even if it's normal but low, your brain shrinks faster as you age. And so it's one of those vitamins that you want to make sure you're getting plenty of. And as we age, we also stop to absorb it. And another thing that prevents vitamin B12 absorption is everybody with gastroesophageal reflux is on an antacid or a proton pump inhibitor. It really drops your ability to absorb B12. So again, one of those things that's easy to check and then quickly to translate. Where are you going to get your B12 from? What are the top sources of B12?
Eggs.
Yeah, eggs, usually meats, and I like to recommend the clams. Why do I recommend the clams? What is this? Clams, 3 ounces, 1,400%. Sorry, I added a 0 on there. 1,400% in 3 ounces for daily needs. So much you probably can't absorb all of that. So, this is part of the resources we made for Eat to Beat Depression, which is an e-course that kind of goes over this information in short videos, a little less loose than today. And the idea is just to give people things to put on their fridge. I realized that it just didn't feel like my field in mental health and brain health were enough in your kitchen, and all the other fields of medicine were. And like, no offense to my colleagues, but I don't think that we're doing a good job in terms of helping you eat the right stuff. So again, when we think about top iron foods, right? Clams, again, come up. I don't take any money from the clam mafia or the kale mafia, just so you know. Pumpkin seeds, one of these real sleeper foods. I see pumpkin seeds going in there. They go in my eggs, they go in my salads, they go in my soups. I'll sprinkle them, I'll have a handful of them with my cashews. And then cashews right here. Oh, and then dark chocolate. Yeah, it's not something we think about as having nutrition. It's something we think about as our guilty pleasure. But it's a plant-based food, it's a fermented food, it has magnesium, iron, fiber. When you get that high cacao content, you're eating something that I would say is quite healthy for you. And then simple swaps, I've been asking you a little bit, like, what are your challenge foods? And one of the reasons is I think it's important to identify those and just think about, like, that pivot. Not that you can't ever have it, but, like, what could you replace it with? It's like when I get people off cigs. Right? What that usually means to people is they stop going outside on cigarette break, they stop touching their face, they stop like having a few minutes to themselves, they stop taking deep breaths. So you've got to replace that really intentionally with something. Otherwise you're just sitting there like picking your arm and like jonesing. No good. Not a good look. So what do you swap out? Now, I mean, a lot of people like, I start my day with a healthy smoothie. It's like blueberries, strawberries, mango, and milk. Or it's like soy milk, right? Or almond milk. And they blend it up with some ice cubes. And it's like, what is that? That's just sugars, right? There's more vitamins and minerals than like pasta, but not much. And so how can we swap that out? Well, if you just drop a couple leaves of kale in there, you've just blown up the nutrient density of that dish. Or what if you throw in some pepitas? We always put nuts in our smoothies. You can't actually make a smoothie in my house without putting nuts in it. You get in trouble. It be almond butter, peanut butter, whatever, but no, because I want proteins and fats in there. I just don't want a sugar one. So simple swaps. Anybody have something in their diet they want us to work as a group to swap out? Anyone? Oh, there we go. Yes, all right. That's good. Thank you so much. You want chips? Okay, let's work this group. So chips, like potato chips, the important nutritional psychiatry food. Tell us about the chips. What kind of chips? You like barbecue, sour cream man, like ruffle. Every time a chip, but if you're looking at the chip rack, or you're looking at the chip rack, all the potato chips, because there's so many potato chips, what's going to be one of your favorites to pick?
I can go for whatever the newest one that is new flavor.
The new flavor chip? What is the newest flavor chip they've made?
Cherry barbecue.
Yeah, that one's really good.
You guys are special here in Traverse City. It's like cherry everything. It's like cherry barbecue potato chip. Well, then the first thing I think about is what's good about a potato? So potatoes are one of the top sources of potassium. Right? Potatoes are also really good as a resistant starch if you heat them and cook them and then cool them down. And so I begin to wonder, first of all, whether this gentleman has any interest in making potato chips. Or is there any way to swap some of those? Probably not, because it's such a delicious, crunchy, easy snack. Right? And then I wonder, well, how else, before we get him off the potato chip, what else could we do to it to kind of make it better?
Cheese.
We should put some cheese. We could have him dip it in something. Like, what if he really doesn't eat a lot of guacamole in his life, but, you know, when he eats the barbecue cherry potato chip, he's gonna, that sounds sort of strange.
It's good.
It's really good. You think it'd be good with avocado on it?
I don't know if avocado.
So eggs.
Yeah. So we can try and increase the nutrient density of the chip. I've never had anybody challenge me with a cherry barbecue potato chip. So I'm not sure I want to swap that out, but it sounds like in terms of loving it, right? Thinking about frequency, thinking about, again, joyfulness. I don't want to take away your cherry barbecue chip. Thinking about where that fits in the diet, right? Where are the problems? Do you buy the big bag or do you buy the smaller bag, right? Are you mindlessly eating it? Or are you guys having your like cherry barbecue chip date? Where you sit down with the chips and mindfully sniff the cherry barbecue flavor. I really enjoy it. So, other things people want to think about swapping?
Ice cream.
Ice cream. So ice cream, what are some easy swaps for ice cream? First of all, Doctor, what do you love about ice cream?
So in Michigan, we have these like places that are only open in the summer. They're like cash only ice cream places. So it's more just like kind of this summer tradition that you can go to.
Why would we want to swap that out? I mean, does anybody have a good nutritional psychiatry reason to get this? I understand it. You're here in this glorious land. You're tootling along with your top down, right? Arm around your partner, okay? And then you pull over, and it's like a little cash place. That sounds nice to me. They probably get special cherry flavors. Do you get one this big? You probably get one like this big. And you enjoy it, right? Just in the summer, for the most part?
Most of the summer, yeah.
Does this? I'd have a hard time getting rid of that. Sounds nice to me. That sounds like what ice cream is for. I think where we struggle with ice cream is where people are eating, you know, a tub because there upset. I have a patient who does that. He's like, then I got a tub of ice cream. It's like, yeah, you do that at our age. Eat the whole tub. Right? That doesn't sound good to me. Or every night having ice cream. I got in that habit with my kids. Who's been in that habit? Where it's the reward. Do all this good stuff, then you get this good stuff. And then I sat with someone who's really professional with eating disorders and was like, you know, using food as rewards and as punishments is just not that great of a habit to get in as a parent. I was like, that's sort of obvious. That makes sense. All right, so how do you, again, get away from that being part of your dietary pattern in a consistent kind of damaging way, and being part of your pattern in a way that's really pleasurable and intentional, right? It sort of honors that special food and where it fits with you. Other things people want. The other swaps are if you're at home, like you want something sweet, do like a whole fat yogurt with some maple syrup and some fruit on it, some nuts. I'll shave some dark chocolate on there, right? So again, still dairy based, still delicious and creamy, but think about all that nutrient density you get with the raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, maple syrup. Maybe I'd spring some cardamom on there, something fun, and I'd probably put some pumpkin seeds on there. Now I put that in front of my kids. We call it a yogurt parfait. My kids don't even know it's not ice cream. Shh. So easy way to swap that out. And also all these other interesting types of frozen treats, right? All kinds of sorbets and all kinds of ways, again, to just diversify it so you're not just getting ice cream all the time. Okay, so as we said, there's lots of tricks in my toolbox as a psychiatrist, lots of meds, but I think there's this farm pharmacy, right? And as we think about all the foods we're talking about, most of them, the ones that are from the core of your diet, and one of the reasons you're very lucky to be here is in this area, is farm-based food, right? For a lot of reasons. There tend to be more nutrients in it. It tends to be organic or organic-ish. Most of these small farms, they know you guys, right? They're not, if they're using something, I don't know, like I lost all my pumpkin squash to squash beetles. That was sad, and I've tried the diatomaceous syrup, but at some point I was just like, if I just like kill all these squash beetles, then everybody's gonna get squash. I don't think the pesticides are all gonna end up in the squash. But I didn't, and we lost all our plants. And so every now and then, organic-ish, I think, is just fine. Anyway, the farm pharmacy, I think, is packed with nutrients. I want you to think in food categories, right? In that dietary pattern. Where is the seafood in your diet, right? Where are the rainbows in your diet? Where is the joyfulness in your diet? This man is a cherry barbecue chip guy, and I don't want to take that away from him. I want to think about how does that orient in a healthy way. When I was living on the Upper West Side of New York, we'd go to birthday parties every weekend, and you'd have like 4 birthday parties. It was like, and at birthday parties, it's the same thing. They'd have like pizza, and then they'd have cake. And I don't know, because I believe that if you don't eat the cake, the child's wish doesn't come true. It's true. So I was eating like, I don't know, 8 pieces of birthday cake every weekend. But that was just then. I wouldn't continue eating birthday cake throughout the week, although it was tempting, right? It was part of my dietary pattern. What brain food categories are super strong or weak for you? Right? Anybody have like one that they think is weak? They want like some advice from the group on? Something just you're thinking as we go through these, like yikes. All right, think about it. We're gonna go through some categories a little bit more, right? Low-hanging fruit, I just mean that like, start with the easy stuff, right? Cherry barbecue chips are like twice a week, or great, they're like twice a day. I don't know. Like, I'd mix it up a little bit, because you're gonna burn out on them eventually, and they'll be like, oh, I can't believe cherry barbecue. And then it won't be fun for you. And then this food category also helps us not fixate on certain foods, right? Like, and that, maybe it's just from my peripheral experience, that after launching National Kale Day and writing 50 Shades of Kale, like every single place I went for the next 5 years, people were like, we made you kale salad. Love kale salads. It was awesome. And I ate a lot of great kale salads, but at some point it was like, yeah, Kale Day, that's great. Like, Kale Day is next week. I don't know. I'm looking forward to it still. I am, but I'm not gonna eat a kale salad, but it was a lot of kale. So it allows us thinking food categories to really think more broadly and diversify our diet, which is very important, especially when it comes to plants, because that's how you have this diverse microbiome. I really focus on harm reduction as a principle in my practice, and I think it's a good thing for us to think about in our homes, which is, because perfection is kind of the enemy of good, and harm reduction is the idea that if I can get you from, I was about to say smoking cigarettes to vaping, but that doesn't really work anymore. If I can get you from, I don't know, being blackout drunk on hard liquor to just having a beer every now and then, right? Or just having beer and never getting blackout drunk. That's a victory for me as a doctor, and victory for you, right? Because then that next step probably is down the road for you, but at least reduces harm. Right? If I can get you from smoking cigarettes every day to having just cigarettes when you drink too much. These are obviously New York problems, sorry. Like that's called 20s in New York for everyone I treat. It's like, yeah, so you went out. No, that happened. And so when we think about food, right, it's the idea of harm reduction, of where are the things that are really low-hanging fruit that you're struggling with, right? The chips and the processed food and the snack, not your chips, but you know, the candies, the stuff that just has no nutrient value. And how can we replace that or swap that out with better things? Stages of change is just a really important way for us to think about change, because usually what I found in medicine is this idea like, we'll tell you, then you should do it. And like, that's not how change happens. Change happens that we need to understand where you are in terms of, are you contemplating change, right? And so this is called motivational interviewing, which I really like as a doctor because it removes me from having judgment that you're changing or not. Like, that's really on you. Like, whether you stop smoking or not start smoking, whether you start eating kale and oysters or not, like, I'm here to present the evidence. It's like, healthcare should be like a restaurant. Like, here's what I got for you. Like, I'll tell you, what's really good today is nutrient density for your brain, I think, but it's up to you whether you incorporate that. And one way I like to think about this is, as we think about food, is to, as you plan, right? So I hope I have you contemplating your brain health relationship to food. And then it's on you to think, I hope you did a little preparing, thinking hopefully as I said something, you spotted some food categories or some ideas that like, wow, that's not, I don't eat bivalves. I didn't eat bivalves. I grew up in Indiana. We didn't have bivalves. Right? So you start preparing, like, well, how would I do that? And then you notice it, right? You're like sitting there in the grocery store, there are the mussels, and you hear them calling you because they're alive. They're like, I'm full of B12. Right? And so you take some action. You go over there and you pick up 2 pounds of mussels, $8, every grocery store in America. Smells like the sea, it's fresh. And you put it in your cart, and you go home and you make them, and they're delicious. And your family's like, oh my God, these are amazing. Hopefully. Or they say like, not my favorite. Something happens. But let's say you find something you like and then you maintain it, right? So it's not just a one-time deal. That's how change happens. And these are just, I put these up here, you can't read these, but these are just, I like it because of the phrases. Because there's reflective, these great skills like reflective listening, right? What it sounds like I hear you saying. Or, it seems that, as opposed to this idea that the process exists within you. Right? Like I hear you saying that you really don't like seafood and that you're not going to eat mussels because they taste way too seafoody. Huh. Like I wonder if there's some milder seafood, or is it just, that's just not going to be a category you're interested in at all? So yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to eat seafood. All right, let's talk about some other healthy stuff. Right? It's the idea of really trying to see you where you are. Motivational interviewing is so good because when you actually talk to people like that, what happens is they come in like, yeah, I tried some sushi. You're like, oh, what was that? Because of my crazy Jedi Knight skills in your brain? No, because when people suggest things to us in a non-judgmental, inviting way, it sticks with us. We get curious, right? Because it's an invitation, it's not an order. I have like 5 minutes left, and I was in the slow jam on my slides, so we're going to go through food categories really quickly. I talked to you about bivalves and nutrient density. I just wanted to put the numbers up there. An oyster is 10 calories, so this is just 60 calories. One of my favorite date nights is when I was with my wife and getting probably 2 dozen oysters. Sometimes we've done 3 dozen, right? So no calories in that meal, but gosh, look at all those long-chain omega-3 fats. If you take a fish oil pill, I want you to compare the fish oil pill to that 565 milligrams, because usually that's the equivalent of 2 fish oil pills, and you just get that in 6 oysters. B12, iron, zinc, again, this is nutrient density. Remember all those people who aren't getting enough zinc? Eating oysters every now and then will get you there. That's the clam pizza I told you about. It's called Rocket Pie. It's an Eat Complete. And Brilliant Books has copies of the books available. When you talk to people about seafood, a lot of people have concerns about mercury. There's a real easy way to think about that is, first of all, you're probably not eating much seafood anyway. And secondly, if you avoid big old fish like big tuna, shark, tilefish, and you go for smaller fish like the sardines, the anchovies, and the bivalves, things like wild salmon, you just avoid mercury concerns. And then, as we talk about omega-3 fats, there's this way that we don't have to just cut out omega-3 fats, but we also want you to think about the vegetable oils in your diet. So anytime you're eating fried food in any sort of establishment, you're eating, it's a potato, but most of those calories come from soybean oil. You're eating the potato chips, right? The chip, that's the good part in there, it's a plant, but what it's coated in is a bunch of usually sunflower oil, or corn oil, or soybean oil, or a mix of those. And in doing that, you're getting a lot of those omega-6 fats. So again, what are some of your go-to family-friendly seafoods? And just some of the tricks we have in our family that surprised me. I mentioned mussels, ceviche, such a really easy way to make I'll get some pre-cooked wild shrimp, chop them up, dump them in lime juice with some onions and some capers, watch it disappear into my children. It's like a miracle. You can do that with any seafood, right? Just it cooks it, take any fish and cook it in lime juice for about half an hour. Tacos, fish tacos are a great way to do things. We caught a catfish out of our pond the other day. I'd done this since I was a kid, and it was like struggling in the net. I looked at my son, and I said, well, I think it's a little early for this, but now Dad's gonna kill something in front of you. Time to get country, son. Like, Dad's pocket knife and cut off its head, and it's still moving. And he's like, is it like 3/4 dead now, Daddy? It's still moving, but it's pretty much all the way dead. Leafy greens, just quickly, is a food category. And by the way, sorry, the end of that story is we cut off the meat together. I hadn't filleted a fish in a long time from the pond. We stuck it in some cornmeal and a little bit of, I don't know, we put in there some milk and an egg. Made a little batter, sat it in overnight, and I fried it up on the grill in olive oil. Oh my gosh, it was so good. So, you can go over for catfish anytime you want. Leafy greens, just a great food category. Again, the nutrients I can tell you about, but the main thing to think, this is the most nutrient-dense food category because you just mainly get water, you get fiber, lots of vitamin K. And just look at this is a cup of kale, right? 33 calories, look at what you get. 200% of your vitamin A, 134% of your vitamin C, 684% of your daily need of vitamin K. And so, and what's interesting about A and K is they're fat-soluble nutrients. Remember, your brain is made of fat. We actually don't know a lot about what vitamin K does in the brain, but it does something. We know that. And then kale teaches us this rule, and I just, since people like food rules, if you focus on foods that are nutrient-dense, whether it's an oyster, an anchovy, or a rutabaga, or a parsnip, or kale, right? You're picking brain foods. If you think about culinary versatility, right, especially for families, stuff that you can use. That's why I like kale. I can drop it in all kinds of stuff, and I think it tastes good. And like mac and cheese. I don't know. Mac and cheese is not a healthy dish, but we use a little quinoa pasta. We use some organic cheddar, and then if you grind up kale in a food processor and put it in there, it makes it delicious. And I like hiding it. It's green, and my kid will eat like cups and cups of this stuff. And it's like salad and pasta all in one. So culinary versatility and then local availability, right? Just trying to get food that is locally available. Those are generally brain foods. And just a point here that you can do a lot of different things with kale. You can make cupcakes with kale if you want. I mean, it's a healthier cupcake, right? It has more nutrient density. I wouldn't recommend that as a starter, but maybe. And then kale chips, just a really great way to get this into your diet. I would try that because I actually like you to follow me on Instagram, and then I would like you to make a barbecue cherry kale chip. And I want you to dedicate it to me on social media. Deal? Deal? All right, that's a deal. I like that. Eat the rainbow because you're getting all these flavonoids. These are miracle molecules. Sulforaphane and quercetin, they do interesting things to your DNA. Mainly it looks like they temper inflammation. Some of them, like sulforaphane, bump up your detoxification enzymes in your liver, which is just fascinating. Things like anthocyanins, we know, travel into the brain and seem to activate genes that decrease inflammation. So eat more rainbows. And you can do that with beans, you can do that with vegetables and fruits, but just an easy way to look at your plate. Colors equal phytonutrients. I told this joke last night, just gotta be careful, right, with eating too many colorful vegetables, because you can get rainbow finger. It's a very scary condition. Be careful of that. So, and again, that's the dessert. Gosh, I was wondering, why am I talking about shaving chocolate on yogurt with blueberries and strawberries? Like, because it's in the slide deck, right? Really, really easy. And then even in your smoothies, right, you can just mix it up. One of these is a pumpkin smoothie. Use a can of pumpkin, put a can of pumpkin, orange, or something else in there, a little kefir, blend it up with a little bit of put a little black pepper and a little turmeric in there. Again, just like a different flavor profile for your morning. I'd go versus the pumpkin spice latte if you want to like do a throwdown sometime. And then the plant problems that people have, right? They worry about bitter, they worry about texture. And again, I really encourage people to experiment, right? The way you incorporate more plants in your diet is by experimenting, taking them home and playing with them, roasting them, throwing them into salads. And then the other issue is just people don't chew. With this dinner we had at Loma Farm, where the chef was talking about, the rule was you gotta chew. It's so important with plants. I find so many people like they're like, I ate that kale and I got lots of gas. It's like, well, you have to chew kale. It's like, you gotta sit with the kale. And then fermented foods, I know we're out of time, but I just wanted to bring up this SCOBY. Fermented foods are all based on the idea that, one, this is how we've always stored food, but two, live cultures do good things for us because we have lots of bacteria living in our gut. And now we're starting to use probiotics in mental health a little bit. There's a really interesting trial adding on probiotics to patients with, bless you, with bipolar disorder. There's a couple of trials in depression. Nothing super strong, but just this, kind of, again, simple farm boy idea that I like. Gut health is super important to your mental health. And we know that all of these, we've neglected the science of the microbiome. And so it's really on the frontier of how we're thinking about mental health. You'll see this used and abused in all kinds of ways of people taking like way too many probiotics, but I think the basic idea is some fermented foods, more plants, and if you had a gut health issue, having some probiotics, it really can be very helpful. Then I mentioned nuts and seeds, just is a great snack. I just want to show you some of the nutrients. It's just 23 almonds. It's actually not 162 calories because the USDA issued a statement saying that nuts have 25% fewer calories than are on the package because you don't absorb it all. And so they're on sale, right? So what does that do? Fewer calories just increases the nutrient density. It's like amazing. But just think about the idea you can get a third of your vitamin E for 120 calories. So just a great thing to think about is the nuts, I tell people to eat nuts and I'm like, oh, don't they have a lot of calories? And it's like, no, they have a lot of magnesium, they have a lot of vitamin E, they have and then I mentioned this last night as well, but BDNF, again, that molecule we started talking about, there's only one nutrient in food group that's ever been shown to kind of affect BDNF, and it's nuts. And actually, nuts are actually one of the only food categories that really correlate with longevity. So for me, that just means, okay, no carbohydrates, lots of minerals people don't get, easily transported, inexpensive. I was just at your beautiful food co-op, and there were these like big jars of pepitas, pumpkin seeds, sitting there. They're like $7, like great. And then I'm at a time, and I just want to encourage you to engage with the meat conversation, again, in a mindful way. I find so many people are so polarized about meat that there's just not a conversation going on. There's like a lot of yelling, the carnivores and the vegans. And I find that to be very, very juvenile, right? I find it to be also very disrespectful. I have vegan friends and I respect that they are eating in a way that matters to them. And I think that's great, I want to hear about it. And I have friends who are carnivores and I want to hear about that. And I can use that experience to make my own choice, but I think there's just a lot of judgment and stigmatizing ranging from how meat affects the climate. Well, you saw that pasture that I have. That pasture that I have won't grow anything else because the soil's not fertile. How could I make the soil super fertile real fast next season? I could put some cattle on there. My only other choice is to put a truck with NPK on there, right? So I don't know, it's like a nuanced argument. Missy and Clover, those goats, I don't want to eat them, but goat is the third most consumed meat in the world. But I like the idea they're on my farm. And then eggs, the first thing I did when I moved to the farm was I got some chickens, because they sort of are super entertaining creatures, but also just seemed like a good deal. Like, I give you a coop, you give me frittata. I was like, awesome. And again, the meat argument, I guess part of what frustrates me with the polarization is that we're not talking about meat. We're talking about processed food, right? When you're talking about a hamburger, what are you talking about? You're talking about like 45 grams of sugar in the bun, iceberg lettuce that's garbage, a tomato that ruins your experience of tomato, and special sauce. Like, I don't know, that's meat? Like, that's just a little tiny, and I don't know, some reasonable amount of that meat is soy. So, yeah, simple, if you're gonna go with the system of meat, I would encourage this system and not this system. And I would encourage you to put your food dollars towards the pasture-raised and grass-based system. And I'm gonna end. I just want to mention beans and legumes. Again, just a great thing as you think about your dietary pattern. I find these are missing so often in people, right? Especially as we're coming into fall. Having your lentil soups lined up, your bean soups lined up. We talked about lunch, taking lunch to work, right? Soup is such an easy, great, nutrient-dense way to do that. And just lentils and lentil soup, I find, is one of the easiest things for us to make. I'm probably the only psychiatrist who prescribes, in addition to prescribing clams, I prescribe crock pots. Because I find it just like, it's like a miracle. You like put in the stuff, get on, go to work, come back, you're like, is my mom home here? This smells so good. And like, so, and again, you can eat the rainbow with the legumes and pulses, great source of protein, great source of fiber. I guess I'd like to mention them because there's this whole anti-lecithin and movement and I don't know, I just feel like beans are a really, really healthy food. So, just to end, I hope you leave here thinking about your brain and your brain health and how it relates to nutrition, and I really want to encourage you to think about what food categories that you have challenges in. And just and not that needs to get solved tomorrow or next week, or that your family's gonna be doomed to mental illness if you don't fix it, but just to have it like on your radar as part of your health goals of just moving you and your family towards eating more nutrient density in your diet. I hope that the idea that you can build a better brain appeals to you, with this idea that your brain is still growing, and everyone in this room, your brain has the capacity to build new brain cells. And that if you focus on your dietary pattern and nutrient density, those nutrients we've talked about, the omega-3 fats, the minerals, and the vitamins, it looks like you can move things towards having more neuroplasticity and a bigger brain as you age. The data seems reasonably clear on that. I encourage people not to be scared of fish, but really to think about that challenging food category and how to do it for you and your family. And remember things like clams. I talked to one of the doctors here, Natalie, and she was like, how do I get involved with this? How do I get involved with this? I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. She's like, I made pasta bongoli last night. And I was like, you're on it, you're doing it. Right? So it's, remember the clams. And then focusing on a whole food dietary pattern. The Mediterranean dietary pattern wins in all the data, but that's the diet that gets studied the most. And again, how do you translate that to your diet? Right? It's not just getting a tapas cookbook and thinking about the principles of those diets that we went over, and again, how you do it, and then how you do it at your home. And then learning from history of just putting the genie back in the bottle. That I find someone mentioned for lunch, a protein bar. There's something probably wrong with that, but if you think about that experience and what that is versus what lunch could be, not that you can never have a protein bar for lunch, we're all on the move, but like, how could that be every now and then? And how could lunch, even in a slow way, just be an experience, right? Maybe it's an avocado. I like to do that sometimes. I'll just eat an avocado and walnuts and a big thing of water, a big thing of green tea. Right? It's plenty of food, delicious, nice and slow, chew it, right? But what if you swapped out the protein bar for that? And again, just do that self-experiment. Maybe you missed a protein bar, right? It's like, probably like a cherry flavored protein bar here. I'm sure it's delicious. And again, what are some brain-focused foods you could try for? I got a yum when I said lox. Maybe you haven't had lox in your oven for a little while, right? Dump some lox in your eggs. How about lunch, right? Doing some of those soups we talked about. Or dinner, right? Even if it's like an egg and vegetable frittata, right? How can you begin to incorporate some of these ideas into your family? I'm easy to find. I'm on Instagram, mainly through Ramsey MD, but also on Facebook and Twitter. And I love interacting on social media, oddly enough. We have our Eat to Beat Depression e-course that if some of these ideas appeal to you, has about 70 short videos that goes through each of the food categories, goes through goal setting exercises, goes through some of the data that we've gone over in terms of things like BDNF and neuroplasticity. And then Eat Complete, 50 Shades of Kale, and The Happy Side. I've never actually been at an event where all of the books are being sold, so it's like been really fun for me. So I've signed all the books over there, but I'm happy to sign them for you. And I'm happy to also answer any questions. Sorry, Fermented Foods. This is a fermented food. So this is tea, kombucha is sugar and tea. And then this beautiful thing, which I don't know how I'm gonna get it through TSA. I'm the doctor, it's actually brain. This is a SCOBY. So what's fascinating about this is, so SCOBY is a symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. And this little disc gets sort of dropped in and then grows, a little piece of it, and ferments the sugar, right? So it takes the sugar out and digests it. And then, you know, when bugs are digesting stuff for us, in Eat Complete I call these things the good bugs. Because there's a really strong relationship between the more of these types of bacteria that you eat and the types of bacteria that inhabit your gut. And so the idea is that when you think about how we've shifted our diet and our health, is that as we've eaten, sort of like a zoo, right? If you owned a zoo, like you inherited a zoo from your uncle and you showed up, you know, it would be like hard, right? You have to order all this different food, and then it's like, you know what, I'm just gonna feed the zoo meat. It's like carnivore zoo time. Like, over the next year, you're only gonna have lions in your zoo, right? That's it. And that's a little what we've done is we've just fed our guts lots of sugars, lots of refined carbohydrates. The types of bugs that thrive on that, they're not actually the bugs that are healthiest for us. And so this is where fermented foods like kombucha, you know, it's not just like a trendy health food, it's actually really important and a great way to kind of revitalize your gut. More of this, more sauerkraut, more kimchi. So I just wanted to, and this one has a name. Hi, my name is Bert. I'm your new SCOBY. Hi, Bert. Great. I think I was supposed to give this away, but I'm probably going to keep it. So I think we're way out of time, but I'm happy to answer questions. If we have time for questions, I think there's another, you guys all have to race off here in a few minutes. But thank you. It's been a real pleasure being with you. And again, the most important thing for me is that you take something from this into your home. That would really just tickle me. It's a lot of different information, but I hope mainly you feel encouraged and you hear there's a lot of connection between your food and your mental health. And I want to just say good luck, and I'm here if you give any help at all. Thank you so much.